this beautiful Sunday night, we are coming to you live from our Nile Serena studios. This is Perspective with Josephine Karunji.
Welcome to the program. Tonight we talk about diabetes in children, and to set the stage for this particular conversation that we are going to have, we spoke to an 11-year-old this week and his parents. Let's hear their story.
As a parent, it can be heartbreaking when you receive news that the child you thought was healthy has a chronic disease. You wonder whether, as a parent, you failed the child. That is what this couple experienced.
I was all crying because I knew I was gone, and the doctors I saw them sitting in a meeting and trying to discuss how to handle him. At that time, I was so confused. I didn't know children do get diabetic. And I was asking so many questions, asking God, asking what is it that I didn't do.
Shama Mungufeni is diabetic. His parents found out in 2008 when he was 2 years old. He fell ill and wouldn't respond to any medication. He later went into a coma.
And when he checked, he found his sugar level was too high. The machine could only reveal high. It could not give the level of sugar in the blood.
They were referred to Nsambia Hospital and the journey began. Things they had noticed before but didn't give attention to began to make sense now. They recalled that Shama's love for water and juice was perhaps a little more than was usual.
Every now and then he would ask for a drink, but we didn't understand what was happening. It was until the doctors told us that he was diabetic.
That time, actual adverts were going that if you see if you urinate and flies are on it, you should check your sugar levels, and we are not understanding anything.
They have 2 other children who don't show any signs of diabetes. While many people assume that a child can only acquire diabetes genetically from their parents, none of Shama's parents is diabetic. Tempted to look into all kinds of solutions, they had to move cautiously.
Everybody was concerned. They sent us books, and we were able to read about type 1 diabetes. And we realized it was an autoimmunity issue. And we asked the doctors what triggers that, and they said they're all doing research concerning that.
They used to give us that encouragement that at a certain age it may go, but we have waited patiently and we are still waiting for that year when the diabetes will no longer be in his body.
Everybody was like, I have here leaves, I have here this, I have a jerrycan of herbs, and until we are sensitized that his pancreas is completely collapsed. It only works for type 2, where the herbs can rejuvenate the pancreas, which is weak, but for him, his beta cells, completely his pancreas has collapsed. So it's like, actually, the doctor says, it's like resurrecting a body.
Shama is 11 years old now. The beginning was rough and the journey has not been easy.
She would go into conversion when he gets low sugars, collapse. Then all of a sudden we again give us something to eat, goes high. It was a lot of really struggle. At night we would not sleep. We would run around checking his sugars, giving glucose. But since as years went on, he learned to manage himself. We have also learned to manage and be calm with the situation. There are days he collapses. When we give something, we begin laughing afterwards all together.
He just changes all of a sudden, and you think he's being stubborn and naughty.
The parents worry for their child whenever he's not with them.
Even when she asks to go for a trip, school trips, my mind is on the night, because the night is the most scary. And the one thing the doctors tell you, don't monitor the night, she will sleep one way.
However, Shama lives his life. He quickly picked up, even from age 2, when the situation was first explained to him.
There was a woman who was selling sodas and so on. And this woman gave him a bottle of soda and he refused. But he could not explain why. And so later on, the woman gave him water and he took. So when the woman came to ask, what is wrong? And she told her that he is diabetic. The woman was amazed. So he already knew.
Shama's meals are carefully prepared. He has to take an insulin injection after every meal and follow other guidelines. He has learned to manage by himself.
It was when I reached P3, P3. It's when I started to do those things on my own.
What's the most difficult thing for you about having diabetes?
Well, it is usually social. Like people tell me that I can't do that, I can't do this, that if I do that, this will happen. When I do that, that will happen. So it just brings me low, but then at the end, I realize that there's no problem with that, so I just do it.
This has come with many lessons along the way.
Well, the first time I said that I want to play football, she said I cannot handle it, that my blood will go low and I collapse in the field, no one knows what to do. So just brought me down.
Recently I was cancelled by a father who told me, do you know there's a diabetic football player, because I stopped him from playing football. I said, you're going to give me heart attack, don't play football. Then he went and told that parent that talk to mommy that I can play football. So the parent told me, said there's a diabetic football player, is it in Real Madrid? So I should read about that guy to know this kid can do anything. So since then I've left him play football, and there's no day she has collapsed playing football, rides bicycles around, he collapses doing other things simple. So I've left it all go. Just to know, parents to know that when we control their sugars, we can control all the side effects, the long-term impact on their body of kidney failure, eyesight, and so on, and they will live.
Shama's parents say the school environment helps. He is one of a few other pupils with diabetes at this school.
So there are around, I think, 6 or 5 kids here. So they always meet, break time, check their blood, sugar. They eat something, if yours is low, you eat something, if yours is high, you inject. They go back to their classes, and their teachers are so cooperative that they release them in between. And the children are also very cooperative. When they see him sleeping, they're able to tell, teacher, Shama is sleeping, meaning the sugars have gone low. When the sugars go low, he just puts the head to sleep off.
This is what Shama would like you to know about diabetes.
It's a disease that is caused through autoimmunity disorder, but it does not spread, things like that. It does not spread, it's non-communicable. And that children cannot die is very fast because of that. It takes some time. But if you control, you can live a full lifespan.
Well, that is Shama's story. Let's meet the team that we're going to have on the panel for this evening. I'll start with Derek Biamche, who is to my very right. Derek is a 26-year-old patient who has managed diabetes since he was 7 years old. He is currently a teacher by profession working with Kampala Diplomatic School International. Welcome, Derek.
Good evening, Josephine.
All right. And then we have Dr. Silva Bahendeka, who is a senior consultant physician and endocrinologist working with Nsambia Hospital. He lobbies for children with diabetes so that they're able to get free insulin and other medical supplies. Welcome, doctor.
Thanks, Josephine, and good evening, viewers.
All right. And finally, we have Jackie Namara Rukare, Jackie is a mother of a 10-year-old boy who was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 2 years. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Josephine, and good evening, viewers.
Jackie, I'll start with you. So your son is 10 years old now. He was diagnosed at 2 years, which is similar for what Shama really, if you listen to his story. You're watching Shama's clip. What are you thinking?
That's just like exactly almost what happened to us. And the diagnosis stage gets you, catches you unaware, because we all think about diabetes, we think about older people. We don't typically think about children, and definitely not that young. So it took a visit with various specialists for the information to sink in and for us to accept, okay, this is now
Well, Derek, you were 7 when this became your reality.
Yes,
yeah?
I was.
How did you know you had diabetes?
It started off, and usually I would have the same kind of symptoms that Shalak was having. I would have the tendency to drink a lot, especially a lot of juices, a lot of water, and for some reason I would always stay thirsty however much I've drunk. So it was a bit unusual for my parents to see. So when we decided to have a physical checkup, at that time it was Doctor's Plaza, and that's where I met my some tests, they actually found out that I was diabetic.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Silva, how easy or difficult is it for you to explain this to parents who walk in?
It's not difficult, and it depends from person to person. Depends which parents you're dealing with. Some parents are well-read. They are well-versed actually with the literature, so it's easier to explain to those. Others are from our local communities, so you need a little much longer time. I can assure you that from the time we started in 2009, when we had a program for looking after children, things have changed since then because people are more aware that the disease is manageable, and now you find it much easier. Okay. If one goes to Sweden, where the incidence is extremely high, you'll find that it's not difficult to explain to a parent you have a child with type 1 diabetes. But when you go to my village and the child gets diabetes, they equate it to an adult with diabetes. And yet, this is totally different disease and is actually much more common than we actually suspect. So it varies from person to person, and every person must be handled in their own way.
So when we were doing this story, we went around asking people if they'd heard of children having diabetes. And the thing was, but the children are too young to start taking sugar, so you can't tell me a 2-month-old baby would have diabetes, because people think diabetes, older people who already are eating normal foods, people who are taking sugar. How do you begin to explain that this is caused by, it's not caused because you're taking sugars or because of this and that?
I'm actually glad that this show is on, because that's exactly what you're doing, what we are supposed to impart to the public, knowledge. And I want to quote one area in the Bible, which was given to me very recently, okay. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, by one of the parents, in actual fact. He says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and our children and adolescents are dying because of lack of knowledge." The earliest child we have diagnosed by nurses, not even by doctors, by nurses, is from Kirembe at the age of 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks. That child is well and running. The oldest person we have is a 70-year-old person, diagnosed at the age of 70, is up and running. So it's lack of knowledge, unfortunately, in both areas, both to the community and to our health workers. And once our knowledge improves, and this is why I'm extremely happy for this sort of forum, these people as God wants them. Type 1 diabetes body. Put back different, but she is still a child with diabetes to the age of 70, and in Europe 90. What happens is that the body develops substances that attack themselves. Now, the whole mechanism is a bit complex for me to explain in a show like this, but in simple language,
yes, the
body develops bullets against itself, just like you have an army and forgets to identify themselves, and they shoot at one another. If one gets a common cold, you develop substances that attack the common cold. Unfortunately, occasionally these substances may mistake your body cells as though they are common cold and attack them. So it's this mistaken identity that actually develops in those who are susceptible, and they develop the type 1 diabetes. Now, most people say it's the pancreas. Actually, it's not really the pancreas. The pancreas harbors those cells that are actually attacked. We call them beta cells. So those cells within the pancreas are the ones that are actually attacked mistakenly.
Okay.
And when they are attacked, then you can produce the substances that lower sugar in your body. And then, of course, type 1 diabetes starts on. And that's why I say type 1 is an easier disease to treat, replace what is missing, and you're done.
I just wanted to add into what Doctor was saying and to basically reiterate what Shama's parents shared with us in their story. Even though we are trying our best to educate, the ignorance that was quoted in the Bible verse that Dr. Silva just shared with us, we have to also take into consideration our cultural and religious context. Much as you might talk to somebody and explain rationally, like he has just done, we are constantly, especially as parents, being told, go to so-and-so, or he or she is a faith healer. Take your child and they pray for your child will be healed. Or I have a kadomola, or I have this magic thing that worked for so-and-so. And you always have to keep saying, okay, yes, I know there might be some remedies which might help in control of blood sugar, but those must always be done in consultation with your primary care giver. Just do not give your child anything and everything that is presented. It's always well-intentioned and well-meaning, but if you take some of those natural remedies, you don't know what the active ingredient is, you don't know what dose you're supposed to give, and some of them might be actually toxic, and you end up now destroying other body organs. So that ignorance, even in people are educated in the, should I say, the literate sense, yes, actually, you're thinking and looking for everything to get your child better, and you have to be able to temper yourself and take a step back and say, but hang on. If this was true, surely somewhere in the world we would have known about it. It would be in the open. The only tried, tested, scientifically verified medicine, if you want to call it that, for type 1 diabetes is insulin.
And it's been 8 years for you, so clearly you know
there
what
is
you're
no other
talking
magic bullet. You obviously use diet and exercise to keep things under control, but insulin is the medicine.
Okay. Well, Derek, before you make your submission, I'm going to ask us to take a short break, and we'll start off with you when we return.
All right.
Saloon.
Welcome back. We're coming to you live from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, Nile Room, and we're talking about diabetes in children today. So before we took a break, Derek, you wanted to say something and I cut you short.
Yes, about relating with the stories that you have done so far on type 1 diabetes, I can relate so much on the journey that this young man took. Shaman took with me, and it's kind of relation where you're first shocked by the new condition, and then you have to really reassure yourself that it can't be that, it's probably curable. And I had that with myself, because I remember when I was diagnosed, I thought, yes, it must be like malaria, it will go in 1 week or something. But as time went on, I had to make myself understand that this is something that I'm going to have to live with, and I have to cope with it, and I have to control it and take over it, not it taking over me. Okay. Yes, and I tried all the herbs and the alternative medicines, but the truth is, it comes back to the fact that it is a must that you're supposed to educate yourself, even the patient himself. You cannot just rely on you can rely on what the doctor has, but see to yourself that you get the information for yourself, learn, because learning is the first thing that will actually help you to counter the disease.
Did you ever have a negative reaction from maybe the herbs or anything else that you took to help the situation?
Not as such. The herbs, they would, but it's like, let's say if we took the insulin and the herbs, you know what the insulin would do, but you didn't know what the herbs would do. And when you combine the two, maybe one would exacerbate the other one. So
because somebody just sent me a message and said they've seen adverts on TV talking about all these herbs that would help. So, Dr. Silva.
Well, that's very unfortunate, because I'm told it's freedom of speech. But this should, of course, have been censored and said herbs cure diabetes. They don't. 100% they don't. What we know is that we know the pathophysiology of type 1 diabetes. We know the pathophysiology of other types of diabetes. There are many types of diabetes. One should not think it is type 1, type 2. There is even what I sometimes call an abuse, something called type 3 diabetes, which is not part of our talk today. But one should be very cautious if you are going to put up that sort of advancement, because you may ruin the lives of many people, and that's why I said ignorance. Now, when one is diagnosed with diabetes, there are 3 important areas to look at. One, the parents, the community are all not familiar with that sort of disease, so they need appropriate education. Then the person who is ill themselves, they need care. Now, the two must be educated at different level. Sometimes, of course, the person with the type 1 is big enough to understand, but sometimes they are small. Now, in our culture, they say, if you do something wrong, I'll give you an injection. So we already have a problem that culturally, our dialect, our discourse every day is, you do something wrong, I take you to a doctor and give you an injection. Now, you brought this child, and the benefit of getting better is an injection. You bring good food, an injection first. So we have to change that mentality. As I said, that type 1, all you need is put back the chip. It's only the various ways of putting back the chip that still disturbs the health worker. At the moment, there are various types of insulins, there are pens, there are needles. There is actually inhalation insulin for those who want to know how far medicine has gone. But at the bottom line, it's that one requires insulin.
Well, Dr. Silva, you keep saying it just requires you to put back the chip, and it sounds so simple.
It is simple.
It's bringing me to the question of, when I put back the chip, is it done?
It's done.
Am I cured for life?
As long as you continue putting back that chip. See, it's the same. The other day, I asked someone, he says, when am I going to stop the injections? And I said, when are you going to stop putting on a dress? And he said, oh, but a dress is, everybody puts it on. I said, actually, one of our tribes were complaining about putting on dresses. And not long ago, less than 20 years ago, they could not allow to put on a dress. To them, it was not usual. So it all depends what you're dealing with. The only important thing is education, education, education.
Yeah. Jackie, how did you explain to your son about diabetes?
It's been a continuous journey, because you have to explain to him at the level that he can understand.
You didn't say the chip?
The chip, well, at the time he was 2, so it didn't make sense. So we had to first explain. He couldn't understand initially, why are you giving me injections? What have I done? Then we had to say, actually, this is medicine, because if you don't take the medicine, then you can't enjoy the food. And then as he got older, then we began to explain. So the condition you have is diabetes. This is how it happens. This is what happens. If you eat a certain type of food, this is what happens in your body. If you eat something else, this is what happens. And these are the consequences if you don't follow the sort of instructions. Then we were also fortunate then to get the carb counting guide. Diabetes is a condition of numbers. You have to know how much food you've eaten, therefore how many carbohydrates, therefore how much insulin you're going to have to inject. And for him to, like, you know what, we're not going to be with you for all your life. So you have to learn how to look at the food you're going to eat and figure out how much insulin you need. Now, of course, it's a lot to ask for a child. But I'm like, if you don't do it now, you're going to find it so much more difficult, because as we enter the teenage years, I am waiting for the rebellion to come through. But we keep having that conversation, and the whole point is to encourage him to become independent and to manage for himself, so that he understands, if I don't do this, these are the consequences. But it's an ongoing conversation, because different things are always coming up all the time, and you talk about them as and when they come up. I just wanted to add that on the issue of support, you cannot have a child with diabetes and think you're going to walk that journey alone. It is impossible. And like Shama's mom said, stopping him from playing football because she thought she was going to have a heart attack, but once she had processed that it was okay, then that was fine. So you need not just the familial support. I mean, for us, my husband Don has stepped up. We have a very fantastic lady, Rebecca, who's been with us from day one, and you need that. Family, you name it, the health professionals, it really does take a village to raise a child, and in this sense, it is literal. It's not just something we say.
One of the things that keeps coming up is it genetic? Did it come from one of the parents? And Shama's parents were quick to say, look, that's what we'd had at first, but we went and got checked. None of us is diabetic. And I'm sure a lot of you have had that story of it came from somewhere. So looking at that, and then is there such a thing as prevention?
Well, when he first explained to me the condition, he said that it's not preventable because it's like your body system, one of your body systems has broken down. It has literally given up, or it has attacked itself, and that is it. So now it comes to you taking over that body part and yourself in such a way that you have to, like she said, do the numbers. If it's the carb counting, if it's the insulin counting, you have to see how you structure your life around combining the insulin and seeing how your lifestyle should be adapted to your levels, to your sugar levels. Because one thing I usually used to do was, of course, like all teenage boys would like football, you know, and going out to play. And what I didn't know was that actually exercise acts like insulin. So it actually helps you to burn off the excess carbohydrates that maybe you've eaten in a meal and thing. But I did not monitor my insulin levels, so it usually gave me a problem. I would usually get hypos, a lot of hypos. And I kind of now started understanding that if I get a hypo, that means there's something that I've done wrong. So over time, I've seen even my need for insulin has reduced quite a bit from that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's about disciplining yourself, all about discipline.
Yes, we are talking about the genetics and the heredity and so forth. Yes, there is what we call genetic predisposition. And when we did studies recently on our population here, our genetic predisposition is not different from that you find in Europe and elsewhere. What is different is that the genetics do not work alone. They need to be exposed. They need the environment. They need a trigger. So the triggers differ from place to place. But we know that if a family has twins and one gets diabetes, the second twin gets diabetes pretty soon. Okay? And even though the person...
Even type 1?
In type 1. Even though the person may actually migrate from one area to another area, like a twin may develop diabetes when he's here, and the second twin goes to the United States and goes there, they'll develop diabetes, although not at the same time. So there is a genetic predisposition. We also know that if you have type 2 diabetes, there is a 1 to 9% chance that a child can get type 1. So there is that linkage in the genetics. But the genetics is not as simple forward as ABC. Okay. There is the environment, there is what other things involved.
All right. Well, let's take another short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center now room. Don't hide it, Derek. Don't wait. So just before we, during the break, Derek was showing me his kit. So what's in the kit?
So we have a glucometer. So this will measure your blood glucose levels. After every meal, what happens is that your body digests the food, and any carbohydrate that you've taken, whether it's bread, a banana, rice, or anything, is converted to a sugar called glucose. Now this would record how much glucose has been absorbed into your blood, okay, or what is circulating in your blood. Okay. Yes. So these are the test strips. These are the ones that go on the front here.
Okay. So this means the child at whatever age has to start learning about carbohydrates and understand all of these foods.
Yes, it's very true.
Actually, everybody should learn
They
about
should learn
that.
about
Okay,
that.
all of us
Yeah.
need to learn
All of
this.
us need to learn about that.
Unfortunately, my battery has run out, but I will get a new one. So the strip goes in like this. Now this area here is where we place the blood sample.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just done with a small prick, not it's not withdrawing so much blood, just a small prick.
So every time you have to do this?
Yes, you have to do this, and it depends on how many, on your regiment that the doctor gives.
Okay, so
for
for you
us,
this is
it
how
was
many times in it?
3 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's morning, pre-morning. Actually, it's more than 3 because it's pre-morning before breakfast, 2 hours after. Then you have to do maybe a lunch.
Okay.
Before lunch, then 2 hours after lunch, then coming towards supper, before supper, and then 2 hours later before you go to sleep.
I'm looking at Dr. Silva because he said a chip.
Yes, because everything works when the chip.
Yes.
Because the chip must be monitored. You don't put the chip back and you don't monitor
Exactly.
it. Now, I must say that the more you check the blood glucose, the better you actually manage the diabetes. And here, of course, we are financially a little bit down, so we are using this technology. But the newer technology now has continuous blood glucose monitoring, where you put a chip again on your skin, and it gives the monitor. I have 2 patients with me at the moment, and I monitor their blood glucose is sent directly to my phone, and I can always look at how they are running the blood glucose. So the monitoring has gone that far. The fact that he said we are using this, which looks like old technology, it's because our oil is not yet out of the ground. As soon as the oil is out of the ground, we shall be there.
Isn't this expensive, though?
Yes, it's quite expensive because I'm not sure of the current price now, but I got this unit at, because when they first came out, they were a lot. They were like 80,000, I think.
Yeah, it's about 1,000 shillings per test per day.
Okay.
That's the minimum.
I think there's a range of meters. So you have meters going from 70,000 all the way to over 200,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Similar for the test strips, I think the most affordable that I've been able to find that are commercially available are at 45,000, and they can go all the way to over 150, depending on how sophisticated your glucometer is and how accessible the testing strips are.
Okay, so I was checking online on social media when we'd taken the break, and people were asking for signs and symptoms. I told you earlier that when Shama's parents said that he was urinating quite a bit and drinking a lot of water and juice like you, people wanted to know now, my son or my daughter does the same. What am I looking for just to be sure that they don't have diabetes? So some of the signs and symptoms that I was given: unexplained considerable weight loss, and you'll tell me if any of them is, extreme thirst that is often frequent feeling of hunger, extreme general body weakness, increased urination, which can also manifest as bedwetting, visual disturbances, commonly blurry vision, abdominal pain, wounds that delay to heal, tingling feeling in the feet or numbness.
But those are the classic symptoms, but
Yes.
one must say that they don't apply to everybody. And sometimes they're very subtle, extremely subtle, so that someone fails to be looking like the normal peers.
So when do I say I'm going to the hospital to check?
If any child is not looking normal, you should always, including the other tests they do, malaria and the rest, they should always check a blood glucose.
Okay. So one of the things that Shama mentioned towards the end of his story was the stigma. In a very subtle way, he said it. He said that, people ask him, is it contagious? But then there's different kinds of stigma as well. Have you, any of you experienced that?
Stigma with diabetes, I wouldn't say I got the stigma so much, but it was more of it was a hide mentality for me, because I didn't want anyone to know that I had diabetes, because it was kind of a burden to me throughout school, and even most of school I rarely would anyone know that I had it, except a few of my friends. And that's a big danger, because if you hide it, that means you're not building your support base.
And if something happens to you?
And if something happens, then catastrophe, and you'd end up in a bad situation.
Okay.
So I would advise that if anyone, or if any type 1 diabetics out there, please do not hide this. However bad it looks, it will be worse if you do not share your story. And I'm so glad that I got to share it afterwards. I have had amazing people with me. My friends, my family, they have helped me so much in impossible ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's probably stigma, but I don't know the right word to use, maybe cultural backwardness, in that we fear that if a child has a problem, then the family has a huge problem. And to the extent that parents don't want to talk about a child having a problem, they think that once someone has diabetes, they can't get married, they will never get a good job, they will never do anything, which is very sad, extremely sad. And that's why we say when you get someone diagnosed with diabetes, please educate the whole group. Educate the family, educate the child or the adolescent, and the community at large, including, when we talk about the community, including the school and the children there. This is an affection, like anyone else will get it, and is manageable very well as long as you apply the appropriate treatment modality.
Dr. Silva, you gave an example earlier. I'm hoping you can give that example again of parents dealing with a child with diabetes, one of them in denial about it or just plainly refusing to acknowledge.
Yes, we have had one where the child coming to hospital said this one has diabetes, and then the mother, of course, as usual, the mothers are mothers, they stay behind, and the man went away and came back and told the wife that actually in my family we don't have this sort of thing, our clan doesn't have type 1, and they left, when we got, and the mother was helpless, so went away. We managed to keep the child in the hospital, actually went to school, and at school also had problems because the teachers were shocked. They said, how can somebody have diabetes? They equate the type 1 diabetes with type 2. But to cut the story short, this boy grew up and improved after insulin, and the mother came back. But despite that, we have failed to get the father back. So that's the sort of ignorance we are really talking about, where someone hides his head in the sand and fails to know that actually these diseases are manageable. And many people, and we have a lot of public people who are managing very well with the diabetes. Actually, we have one astronaut who talks at conferences on how difficult it is to give insulin when you are out of space. So it can affect anyone, and it's manageable. It's manageable. As I said, it's like a chip. Put it there and do it well.
All right. In terms of stigma, again, education. There is no way that we will be able to deal with that sort of reaction when people are not aware of what is actually truth and what is myth. So what I found works for us, especially in the school setting, is every new class that David goes to, I go and have a conversation with the teachers and the admin staff, and this time he's the one who has the conversation. So we have our materials and he walks them through. This is what diabetes is, I've had it for this long, this is what happens, and yes, I can play sports, I can do everything anybody else can do. And he shows them how he's going to measure, so that, because we had an issue before where the school was reluctant to allow him to take measurements in class. But we were able to overcome that. Now, everybody in the class, they're actually the ones who tell him, David, you've not measured. So there's a bit of accountability in that regard. But you can only get that reaction if you've gone out and actually educated the people around you about what it is you're dealing with and what they can do to help.
Okay. We'll just have about a minute left. Dr. Silva, I'd like to give you the final say. What would you like us to go on with from this conversation?
That type 1 diabetes is easy to manage as long as you learn how to manage it. It's like a chip, replace what is missing, replace the insulin.
Okay.
There are various ways of replacing it depending on the resources. And as I said, as we develop, we shall have those good resources. At the moment, there is a closed loop where you put it there and it does itself and does what your body should do.
Okay, so I'm told that there's more than an estimated 19 million people in the world that have type 1 diabetes. 1,169 persons with type 1 diabetes, and this is in Uganda, are registered for care in 25 specialized clinics across the country, the same number of girls as boys with an average of age 15. At least 2 persons with type 1 diabetes are enrolled every week. The daily requirement for treatment, that is insulin syringes, glucose testing strips, cost a minimum of 250,000 shillings a month, basing on the current market prices. Caretakers of only 10% of the 1,169 children and adolescents are likely to afford this cost. How do we take care of this cost?
Government is doing that.
Government is doing it?
Yes.
We're not asking them, they're doing it?
The government is doing that.
Wow. Okay.
But we would like also the rest of the ecosystem to join in. I've been fortunate that we've been able to get most of the supplies through the medical insurance cover that my husband has, but it's a struggle. Even with medical insurance, people who you would think have a wide exposure and knowledge. In other countries, in South Africa, for example, it's the insurance companies which push for kids to go on insulin pumps, for example, because they get far better management than this one where we are titrating. I gave 8 units now, let's see what happens. No, there you're using a more scientific method and you can give micro units. Here we have to give, I think the smallest we can get on a pen is half a unit. So we need not just government, but we need everybody in the healthcare system to actually help
Let
us.
me clarify that a little more. When we say that government is doing it, yes, it has other competing interests. There is malaria, there is leprosy, there is the rest. So it gives us the minimum, and we've had others coming in, which I shouldn't forget to thank. That's Novo Nordisk, which at the moment is supporting this assisted training. So while the government is able to do that, there is also a need to move a little further and have more done.
Yes, and also there is I would like to talk about this Sonia Nabeta Foundation. It's a foundation that was formed by a lady called, I keep forgetting her name, but her sister was type 1 diabetic.
Okay.
Actually, she's called Vivian Nabeta, and her sister was type 1 diabetic. So when she passed on, it was for her cause that she would she would create an advocacy group that would look for ways in which we can teach people around the communities, and also try to see if we can make advocacy and teach and tell the government or governments, different governments, that we need these medical supplies here, the needs that we have. Yeah.
Right.
So
Jackie also mentioned you belong to a support group, and this is just in a few seconds.
Yes, so we started a support group about 8 years ago. It's called Sugar Cubes, and it was out of our own experience because we were thrown at the deep end, and at the time there was nothing really. So what we primarily do is work with families to help them run from when they get the diagnosis and then an ongoing management. So we provide primarily education and advocacy from time to time.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming to the show.
Welcome.
And special thank you to David for allowing his mother to come on the show this evening and leave him at home. I was supposed to send my greetings and I've sent my greetings. Well, I thank you all so much for watching. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.